We are so happy to have you here. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we start. If you notice down at the bottom of your screen, there's two things I want to point your attention towards. One is that we've enabled closed captioning. So if that's helpful to you, you can enable it on your device by clicking on closed captioning, and it'll tell you in real time. And it also attributes to the speaker, so that's helpful too. The last piece of that is you can move that closed captioning box around. If it's blocking your view, you can move it anywhere on your screen. The second thing is that we are going to take questions. The DFW Chaplaincy Department is here with us, and they're going to speak for a while. And then, as is our practice, at about the halfway mark, we'll open it up for questions. And so we'll take all your questions through the chat, which is down there at the bottom. Gabe said hello to you as you came in. Sharon Crandall, who's the director of PRISM, who's up somewhere at the top of your screen with a blue screen like mine. Thank you, Sharon, for being here. And she monitors the questions for me because my brain is tiny and I can't do all the things that are required of me, obviously. So with that in mind, we're going to keep you muted just because we have found that works best. So to put your questions in the chat is how we're going to do it. So again, welcome in. Tonight we have Father Greg, who's from the Dallas-Fort Worth Department of Chaplaincy. We had planned to have 3 chaplains with us tonight, and that's okay. This is what happens in chaplaincy. Sometimes wires get crossed, and that's fine. We will miss having Bishop Hayes and Chaplain Muxon, but Father Greg McBrayer is actually the chairman of the board. He's the director. He's kind of the big cheese at DFW. And I am going to get all the details wrong, but here are the broad strokes that I understand about Father Greg. One, he works he's not an air traffic controller, but I think you're a supervisor of air traffic controllers for American Airlines. So he is in the airline industry, and has been a vital means by which the DFW Department of Chaplaincy has grown and played such a huge role at the DFW airport. So we're excited, Father Greg, to have you here. He's a very humble man, but I will tell you that Father Greg works from 4 a.m. to 1 a.m. So he's done that, and then he ran a church service, and now he's here with us. So this is a deep act of generosity on his part, and I am so grateful for your presence here. So we're excited. This is the feedback, Father Greg, that we hear over and over again. And what I said to you is most people don't know that airport chaplains exist. So we're excited to hear about DFW chaplaincy and even your road into being a chaplain. So welcome.
Well, I just thank you so much for allowing me to be here, Janet. It's a privilege to be here, and it's an honor as well to be here representing DFW Airport Chaplaincy. And before I tell you about that ministry, and let me give you just a little bit of background, I think, on kind of describe to you how I got here. I am what's called a bivocational priest. I have been ordained for 27 years and have worked in the aviation industry for 45. My daytime job is I'm the chief flight controller at American Airlines. I work in the Flight Control Center, and I work on the bridge that runs American Airlines worldwide, tactically and strategically every day. I work on a small team of about 6 people that represent 550 people on the flight control floor. And I show up to work every day in that role in my profession, but that role has overlapped with my vocation since September the 12th of 2001. So let me tell you a little bit how I became a chaplain and how I got in chaplaincy ministry from the church ministry that I had originally been a part of when I came through seminary years ago. I have been in aviation all of my life. I have grown up in the church in my life and been in and out of the church most of my life, but heard God's call in the mid-90s and was living in Pittsburgh at the time. I'm a product of multiple airline mergers. I have been with 4 airlines through 4 major mergers. And at the time I was with US Airways in Pittsburgh, where Operations Control Center was, which I was working as a flight controller there in Pittsburgh. At that time, I had pretty much compartmentalized my faith life and my work life. It was a different season in time where, your faith really didn't have a place in the work world. I was doing a little Bible study in a back room, and people knew that I was engaged in the church and was leading the church, working on a church staff and that kind of thing. But Until 9/11, it really had remained somewhat compartmentalized. I went to work. I didn't have really any desire to be in chaplaincy ministry. I didn't know a whole lot about it. I had grown up in the church world, been called to ordain ministry in the church, and that's what I had pursued. I was certainly familiar with what chaplains did. I learned that going through seminary, and I knew some chaplains that were primarily just military, from military backgrounds, and they were part of my formation process, so to speak. And then later I could see where God's fingerprints were on that and what he had in mind for me. But I went to work on 9/11 like everybody else that morning. It was a day like no other for me personally. I went to work that morning. I had a lot of traffic that was coming up out of Florida going into the Northeast. It was a beautiful day, and it looked like it was going to be a really good day for us. Operationally, the weather was extremely good. Had everything on flight plan, on course where it was going, and all of a sudden, we get a call from the command center that says, that we're having some aircraft are under attack, and for us to get a hold of all of our flights at the time and get them on it, put them at the nearest suitable airport. So I went to work like all the other controllers that day, getting my flights on the ground. And I had 4 flights that were up into New York or into Washington Center Airspace going into New York Center Airspace, and got a hold of them, got them on the ground. And it was a really busy day. It was really chaotic. Didn't really realize what was going on around us because we were so engaged with our work. And it's just a really busy, hectic environment in a flight control center anyway. At any given day, there's about 5,500 flights over our head in the national airspace over our country. And so I went home that day like everyone else at the end of a long shift, and got home, turned on the news, and saw the surreal visions that everyone else saw in the world, and realized at that moment that my industry and what I did for a living in my life would probably never be the same. I had a sleepless night, prayed most of the night, went back to work the next morning at 4 a.m. and I walked in that flight control center like I had for decades. And I walked in there and I saw the faces of the people that I worked with, and they're the most focused people you'll ever see. They're very guided in what we do in our profession. And I looked around that room and there was nothing on the radar. There was no traffic overhead except for military traffic. And I realized in that moment, the gravity of really what it meant in my life and in my industry. And I can remember at that moment saying, "Dear God, we need you here." I could see fear, anxiety, and uncertainty in the faces of my colleagues. And I cried out to God, and all of a sudden I hear his soft, still voice saying, "Well, that's why I placed you there." And so from that moment forward, I never compartmentalized my faith in my work. I started showing up to work then as an ordained clergy that was working in a secular setting, where, because there was a need for what I could offer there was a tremendous need for care at a level in our industry that was extremely riddled by this event. For 3 years, we lost a bunch of employees. We had job cutbacks. Our company was in bankruptcy within 2 weeks. So was United Airlines. So it was a long journey from us through the ashes of 9/11. But in that journey is what resurrected a chaplaincy ministry in my life. And I realized at that time that I was not probably best equipped to deal with what I was dealing with in the secular world in ministry. It's completely different than the church world. It really and truly is. There are 2 different entities and there are 2 different ministries, and they certainly overlap in around care in certain topics, but they're different ministries. And I realized that wasn't part of the training I got in seminary, so I started seeking training. So I went out and took every kind of thing I could find in teaching chaplaincy. I had a spiritual director at the time. Janet's familiar with what that is. And this guy was a former Episcopal priest who'd been an Air Force chaplain. And he was the guy that was mentoring me anyway, which was just by God's grace. He helped me a great deal in really developing as a chaplain. And so really the role developed around me in the airline industry. And the company saw immediate fruit in this. They saw that there was something that I could provide that HR at that time and our EAP could not provide. And that was a level of spiritual care that was needed in a crisis. And I truly thought that my whole life and career was really for that moment in time until the pandemic hit. And then I realized that for 20 years, I had been groomed for what was going to happen for 2 years in my industry as a frontline airline employee in a flight control center, running the largest airline in the world, trying to care for people when people couldn't even get to their churches. So through that journey, chaplaincy kind of formed in my life. And then I went out and pursued everything I could learn about it and study and get every certificate I could get in it. When I got moved to Dallas and the completion of the airline merger between US Airways and American, I came down here and I had been showing up to work. This is how I dress to work. I wear a tab collar every day to work, and I sit on the flight control bridge, and that's the role I've been in. The company has utilized me in ministry. I can go into work. I've got a go kit packed every day, and we could lose an employee tomorrow morning in Philadelphia on the ramp in an accident. In fact, we lost a kid in Austin 2 months ago. I go to work, I find out the call comes in, I'm notified from the company, and I'm on the next flight to take care of one of our employees to provide chaplaincy ministry. And so when I came to American Airlines, when we formed this massive airline down here, I came to work like I always do. And American immediately saw a value in what that brings into that setting. It's a high stress job. The airline industry is full of stress and all kinds of other complexities that when you're working with frontline customers, all around the world. And so I got involved in that. And when I got down here, before I left Pittsburgh, I had already started working at a chapel at Pittsburgh International Airport. They had a chaplaincy there. So I got engaged with that. When I came down here, I came to Dallas, and Dallas already had an airport chaplaincy that had been structured down here since 1977. In fact, it's the largest airport chaplaincy in the world. We've got 5 chapels at DFW. We're going to have a 6th when we build the F terminal at DFW. We've got a staff out there of 25 chaplains, and we have people from all faith walks doing chaplaincy ministry. Muxum is our Muslim chaplain. He wasn't able to make this call tonight, but we're the largest in the world at what we do. And we've been doing it since 1977. It was actually formed from a former Braniff captain who was a Air Force pilot and was drawn into chaplaincy ministry and what it brought to him in the Air Force in Vietnam. He brought it to Braniff Airlines, and then it was embraced at DFW Airport when the airport was built. And so we've been there since DFW International has been built. We're the second busiest airport in the world today, and push about 75 million people through DFW Airport. Our chaplains at DFW, we have a staff of 25, and what they do is they come in and they work a 5-hour stipend shift. They come from all different denominations and the 3 major Abrahamic faith lines we have represented as well. And what they do is they come out and they work a 5-hour shift. Most of them are working in church ministry. Several of them that we've hired, and the ones we often try to find when we're hiring people, are former military chaplains, because I call them plug and play. They've been very well trained to do ministry in a very diverse setting. And an airport is a very diverse setting. I mean, an airport is like a Corinth of the modern day world. I mean, it's a cross-sectionality of people from every walk of life all over Earth. And when they come to an airport, they come into a very, high anxiety environment. Flying, as we all know, is a very stressful thing, and it's gotten much more stressful in the last couple of decades. So when people come to an airport, it creates a ministry opportunity. It doesn't matter if they came from the poorhouse or the penthouse. When they show up at an airport, they have to come in and they have to surrender completely, because their lives are out of their control. It's at the mercy of an airline. It's at the mercy of the weather or all the other variables of flying. So it creates a real anxiety-ridden experience for a lot of people. And there we come into the picture. At DFW Airport, our chaplains show up. We have a blazer that we wear, or a vest that says chaplain on the back. We have a patch that identifies us on the front. And our chaplains will come to work for their 5-hour shift, and they'll work through the terminal. They'll visit employees. They'll go down the ramp and talk to airline employees. They'll be up in the terminal talking with customers, with travelers. They'll do services. We provide both a Protestant 15-minute prayer service and a 30-minute chapel mass throughout the day. I do 2 of them every Sunday morning before I serve my church on Sunday. And they're very rich ministry. They're filled up, believe it or not, by announcements. We'll make a 10-minute announcement every 10 minutes for an hour prior to the service, and it fills it up. And so they'll come to us, and it creates a really good ministerial illustration, because all of us are on a journey in life. And this is always my pitch before every chapel mass. We're all on a journey in life. And your journey brought you to that airport today. And in all the busyness of this airport, and all the madness of 5 different terminals connected by a train system, you heard God's voice invite you to come and receive Word and Sacrament today over that speaker. And you probably didn't at first understand what the announcement was. But 10 minutes later, it comes again. And the next thing you know, they're finding the chapel. And they come and they really receive something that God meant for them to hear, because God had to open their ears, and we receive our salvation by hearing God's word. He opened their ears and drew them there. And that brings peace to their journey. And just the chapels themselves, whether they're a service or not, they provide a place of tranquility and quiet and peace in an airport, which is a buzzing area of activity and anxiety. So that's what airport chaplaincy provides. And that's what the chapels provide. And we're part of a larger armed. You would think, well, I've never seen one in an airport. Well, there's one in LAX, to be honest with you, and there's one at most of all the major airports in our country have a chapel and some sort of chaplain there on duty, or has a staff, whether it's small or large, that's covering and providing chaplaincy ministry for both travelers and employees. And there's staffs as large as 40. Atlanta Airport has a staff of 40, and the guy who is the director of that chaplaincy, like myself in DFW, it's an all volunteer staff there. And so, I mean, there's different models on the way this work, but we all work under what's called the International Association of Civil Aviation Chaplains. And it's an organization that's global because there's airport chaplains and chapels all around the world. All the major airports in the world have them. Whether you're going to Heathrow or wherever you're going to be going, there's a chapel there somewhere. And there's usually a chaplain on staff, at least on limited hours. And so this International Association of Civil Aviation Chaplains is what guides the entire model globally. And that's where we have the model of either having a 15-minute prayer service or what we call a chapel mass service that brings some consistency and continuity to the deliveries and what you can receive here, as opposed to the same thing you might hear offered in, at a chapel in Heathrow tomorrow. And that's kind of the umbrella that kind of overgirds all of what we do globally. We gather annually to annual convention. It's usually held overseas. This year it's back in the United States, but last year it was actually in Africa, and the year before that it was in Heathrow. So it moves from site to site. At some point, I'd like to host it in Dallas before I retire. I'm going to try to work for American about another year and a half, but I'll continue to serve American in my role as a chaplain. I also serve not only as a chief flight controller, but I also serve as a corporate chaplain in American. And what that looks like is I extend the ministry of the 25 chaplains that I have at DFW through what I call a CHAP app that we have now that our employees have at American Airlines that can connect them to an on-duty chaplain, whether they're in Dallas or in Charlotte or in some other place in the world. It can connect them with a chaplain. And it's just a way to broaden our footprint and make ourselves more available to people. And that's the way we extend that. And that's a growing trend in airport chaplaincy right now, and also in corporate chaplaincy. It's another way that we can extend a level of care, because this is all about providing care. Whether it's an employee or a traveler or whoever it may be, people, they won't remember what you said or what you did. They'll remember how you made them feel. And if you make them feel cared for, that'll bless their journey, whether they're in an airport, whether they're traveling, whether in my office at American Airlines or somewhere around American Airlines system. That is a level of care that companies see a tremendous value in. And it's a growing trend in the corporate world right now for corporate chaplains to be part of a care team for corporations. It's not there to compete with existing HR, the way HR works, or the way that other parts of your company might work through EAP or whatever it may be. It's not there to compete with that, but to complete that. It brings a more comprehensive care package to an employee or to a traveler, whoever it may be, and that blesses people's lives. And they'll remember that. And as an employee, they'll work harder for you. As a customer, they'll be more in tune to you and remain a customer. We've seen it both work in the area of recruiting and retention at American Airlines, which are two big things right now in the corporate world. But now I can take a breath. I don't know how many minutes I talked there, but it seemed like it was a while. I'll pause there, and Jana, tell me where I need to go or what we need to do from this point. I don't know how long I talked, but probably 20 minutes.
Well, first of all, I'm riveted. So I haven't been keeping track of how long you've been talking. I've been watching the faces of people, and I'm not the only one who's riveted. Yeah. Okay. Sarah is literally clapping right now. So I have a few questions, and I have told Father Greg this, that if none of you put anything in the chat, people, I have a million questions for him. So if you have a question, you better get it in there, or I'm going to start running. So I have been to your chapel in Terminal D. It's your largest chapel. And there is a huge area for Muslim worshipers. And I feel curious how that came to be and how you collaborated with the Muslim community.
That is a great story. I'll pause you there. We have ablution stations, is what it's called in the Muslim faith. Mm-hmm. And there, as soon as you walk into our chapel, when we were moved into the new D terminal space, where we were further up into D at D21, and the CEO of the airport came to me and said, "Look, I can give you a larger space in the connector between B and D." I said, "That's great for us. We want a bigger chapel." And I said, "Well, let me ask you this too. Can we work out something where we can provide ablution stations for our Muslims?" And he goes, well, yeah, I can work on that. And so that the conversation paused there, and then the months went by. Construction is slow, you know how it works. But when we started the construction project, before we started it, my Muslim chaplain came to me and he goes, hey, look, the North Texas Association, Islamic Association, has raised $40,000 to invest if you can use this money to put ablution stations in that chapel. I said, that'd be great. I'd love to do that. Let me circle back to DFW Airport. Well, I went back to the CEO at DFW and I said, hey, look, we've got a $40,000 donation right here from our Muslim worshipers if we can put ablution stations. He goes, well, I'll tell you what, we're going to cover the cost of it. It's not going to cost you a dime. So I went back to my Muslim chaplain and I said, hey, you know what? DFW is going to pick the bill up on this. They had already actually budgeted and put this in the budget. So, you know what? I thank you for your effort, but they're going to cover it. He goes, well, you know what then? Put it in the ministry. We want to bless your ministry with it. So it was a $40,000 gift to us. So that's how they got there, and that's how it blessed us. And I mean, that just is one example. But yeah, we're one of the few airports in the country that have ablution stations right when you walk into the chapel.
It's huge. I mean, they're like they're not a small thing. They're shower size, and it's impressive. And you have, in fact, I mean, I know you know this, but the people listening may not. Like, you have to pass by all of that before you go into the chapel. So it really has this feeling of being interfaith, that it's a very mixed environment. Like it's not like so often happens in a hospital chapel. Oh, right. You know, there's all these Christians iconography, but we'll do a little something for our Islamic brothers and sisters.
No, it's very present and very visible. Yeah. The other one that I've seen that's close to that is Minneapolis has a really, if you're ever in Minneapolis, they've got a really visible, nice ablution stations in their chapel. But in some of them do, but a lot of them have to use make-do sinks in places that around the airport where they have designated for those spaces, but they're not exactly convenient. And I'll be honest with you, the Muslim worship day is Friday, and their Jummah service starts at 1:30 on Friday. And where I can seat 40 people in a chapel to do a chapel mass, and they'll be full on all the chapel masses in standing room only, in fact. Well, the Muslims on Friday will move all those chairs out of the way, and they'll have 85 guys in there because, you know, they get close together and they can bend down, and they pack the place every Friday. Pack it. And so it's a real robust interfaith ministry. We've been an interfaith model from the very start. It's the only thing that works in our world today. And you know, it's a blessing to have what they provide. And even, in fact, in my role of representing the chaplaincy, I went to 4 iftar dinners this year with Muslim leaders from all around the Metroplex area in the Dallas, Fort Worth area, just in good fellowship, to do interfaith dialogue with them on the importance of being our authentic selves and being able to come to our work in our airport and be who we are and be appreciated and valued for that. So there's a lot of interfaith between the two of us and the Jewish faith as well.
There's a question coming through about separate sects of both the Islamic faith, Sunni and Muslim, if you have separate chaplains for Sunni and Muslim worshipers. And then there's a question about Hasidic Jews, and if there's any resources for Hasidic or Orthodox.
We have one Orthodox. We have one Jew on our rabbi on our staff is what we have right now, and he will primarily do ministry in the terminal. It's hard to get them there on a Saturday or on a day of a week to do a service for them. We've had them in the past. Right now, we don't have one. We've only got the one Muslim chaplain, and Muxin is there 3 days a week doing ministry in the airport, and he's got a really large following. And like I said, he fills up the Jummahs on Friday, and always has. So I mean, he's our longest running chaplain. He's been there for, I think, 28 years now. He's been there longer than Dee, and he's one of our longest tenured chaplains.
I feel curious if you have a sense of when that chapel space fills, what percentage of it are travelers and what percentage of them are employees?
That depends on around flight schedules. I do 2 early services on Sunday mornings, one at 7 and one at 8, and it's about probably 1/3 of employees and the rest travelers. One thing that's helped, I think, the traveler attendance is people get to airports now earlier than they used to because of TSA. So if they get there early on a Sunday morning or whenever they get there, if they get there early enough, it gives them time to say, well, you know what, I just heard that thing, and it's in 2 more times they'll hear it. And they realize they've got 35 minutes to get there, and they don't leave for another 2 hours. So they'll come and get on a train to ride out there and come to the chapel. But yeah, you see a lot of more travelers than you do employees because they're working. Now it's the opposite with the Muslims. They will take their lunch break during that hour for 1:30 for Juma, and they'll be mostly filled with employees, and that would include TSA employees and people that work for Prospect and the other contract employees at the airport.
Can you talk a little bit about what chaplaincy looks like outside the chapel? Like what's the work look like in terminals?
Sure. You know what? Well, we're out there in the terminal and we're just meandering through the terminal. We're very identifiable with what we wear and what we have on. And you'll see where a chaplain will have, like, oftentimes we'll come up with like a pattern that we walk. We try to spread guys out in different terminals so we're invisible in all 5 terminals. But they'll get a circulation of people they know. There'll be vendors that they'll see at the restaurant, or people they'll see, on their walk every day. And they'll stop and visit those people. And of course, being a good chaplain is all about being relational. And Jen, I know, would agree with me. Not all of my colleagues are that relational. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that. But if you're a relational person, chaplaincy ministry is more suited to you. Some are just not that comfortable doing ministry outside the walls of the church or the people they know. I'm not like that. And most of our chaplains aren't like that. They're very engaging people. So they see the same people oftentimes on their walk. And of course, they encounter countless travelers. And so they may encounter someone that is having an emotional moment, having challenge with travel, irate. It could be anything. I always talk about chaplains. We're kind of like WD-40 and duct tape. Those are 2 household essentials. And in the same way, just like WD-40, it squeezes, it reduces friction, and duct tape holds things together. And that's kind of what we do in a very anxiety-ridden, environment like an airport. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of tension. There's, there can be hostility. So we get engaged in a lot of different things. We're there to bring a level of care and also to bring comfort or to bring peace into a situation. And those things happen in airports. We get involved oftentimes when there's someone has a medical emergency or something like that. They'll ping us and bring us to, where there might be someone who's in need. We're waiting on the medical people to show up or something like that. And in fact, I just had a guy laying on the floor as I was walking out of the terminal 2 weeks ago, and he had just passed out. I'm waiting on, the police to show up, and I'm there trying to comfort this person. And so, you get involved in all kinds of things like that. You get involved. There's a lot of anxiety in the airline industry right now with the employees because of the challenges we had through, the pandemic and cutbacks and not having the right staffing. So there's a lot of anxiety things that we intervene in there. We also do a lot with the military. We're part of the American Airlines military team. And so we do what's called dignified transfers on the ramp through DFW. And we do about 150 of these a year. In fact, we do 3 to 5 of them a week. So every time there's a military transfer, and a remains will come in out of Hawaii or somewhere, or it could be a fallen soldier or an active duty soldier. They'll come here, they'll land here. We'll give them the dignified transfer. We'll take them off the airplane with the honor team, with the military escort. We'll wait with the family if it's an active duty person and comfort that family. And then when they're put on the next flight to go, we're on the ramp as the remains are loaded, and we're there with them for that whole piece. We do the same thing with employees. I do countless funerals at American Airlines. In fact, I've had 2 this past week, got 1 a week ahead of me. And so I do a lot of engagement in ministry around that area as a chaplain as well.
I want to go back to an earlier comment that you made, and you said that the ministry inside of a parish or a church is completely different than outside. And a question that comes up in training chaplains a lot, well, the question that always comes up is, what is the role of a chaplain? But I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit, not necessarily to answer that question, unless you want to, but to talk a little bit about how you understand your role, the differences between a pastor in a church and a chaplain, specifically. Your answer would come from DFW, but well, what's the difference?
Well, when I go to a church and I'm pastoring a church, and I do pastor a church, I've got believers that are Christians that are coming to that church because that's their church family, that's their church home. And so we shepherd them. That's what a pastor does. We shepherd them. We we disciple them. We try to build them into disciples. We teach them, we preach to them, and we care for them in every way we possibly can. And they come to us. As a chaplain, that's not always the case. I'm out there in it. And so maybe everybody, I mean, not everyone I'm going to encounter is going to be a Christian. And the fact of the matter is, they don't even care. I can tell you right now, when a person is in need or they're in emotional trauma or something's going on in their life in an airport or in an office setting or something like that, they want someone to come in and to provide a level of care to either de-escalate a situation or to bring some hope into a situation or just to model the Christian life. I mean, the best sermon you'll ever hear is the one you see. So, I mean, if you model that and you just live in a caring nature to care for people. I heard something, I love the intro talking about, a hug. People need community and people need to feel cared for. And in this world today, a lot of people aren't. So unlike the church where they come there to receive that, God deploys us out there where the need is front line. Chaplains are on the front line of ministry. I'm not out there to convert people. I'm not out there to change people's faith, or whatever they believe. I'm out there to care for people and model the Christian life that Jesus called us to model. And that's to love others as we love ourselves and love our neighbors like ourselves. It doesn't matter what their faith is. And I have prayed with people from every faith on earth. And you know what? When they were in a need, they didn't care. They just wanted someone to be there compassionately for them, to help them in the moment, to give them a little glimpse of hope, and to get them back on their way that they could continue their journey. And that's what we do. We intercede on people's journey in this life. And that's, I think, the difference. I think that a lot of guys aren't real comfortable in that. Being a good chaplain is not only knowing what to say, but what not to say. And so there's growth in that. That's not what happens in your seminary track on your normal D-Min track, as Jenna or anyone will tell you. You have to go seeking that kind of training. It's not on what you go to seminary to become a pastor for and lead the church.
Like, I know this isn't a part of our conversation, but as you sit here and talk, I'm like, I want to take Father Greg everywhere I go. And when somebody asks me what a chaplain does, I just want to point to you and say, do your spiel, because it's a compelling description that you're offering. And I also feel, I want to ask you a little bit, and I'm going to just kind of put my cards on the table, and anybody that knows me already knows this. I feel curious about how your caller in the workaday world is received. Part of me wants to say, like, there has to be people there, Father Greg, that are like, what's with this guy? Who's this guy?
Well, they probably are. And something, I think that one thing, it makes you identifiable. I mean, it's also, you have to live into it. It's, I had a professor one time that told me, and it was a female professor in seminary, and she goes, not everybody wears a collar every day, but I was told one time that God puts a collar around some people's neck every day because they need to have it around their neck to remind them every day. And the fact of the matter is if you're identifiable in your faith, people don't really care. I mean, people know that I'm of faith. I don't try to push my faith on people. I'm out there to just model the Christian life to the best I can. And the fact of the matter is a priest, we're called to be you're a priest every day. This is the one thing I can't walk away from. I walk away from my job in my profession. I can't walk away from my vocation every day. I laid on the floor and before God and said, this is what my life's going to be surrendered to do. And that's what I've done. And in our tradition or in our tribe, this is the way we look. And it's just what we wear. Right. And it doesn't separate me from or set me apart from anyone else, but it does help make you identifiable. And they're looking for someone to provide care. And hey, whatever it may be. Yeah.
Well, I think part of it, I suspect, has to do with your personal credibility, right? I mean, because I think a caller in lots of work contexts would make HR incredibly nervous. So I think a lot of it is about the credibility you bring to your role and to American Airlines and your history there.
I think you're 100% right. And I've been there for 45 years. So, I mean, people have known me long before, I wore a collar to work every day 20 years ago. But they've known me for a long time. And these are the people that run the airline. I mean, I've known these guys in my daily work, every two times a week, I'll go to our C-suite and I'll make a lap, and I know everybody on that C-suite and they all know me. I know their children, I know their families. I'm their caregiver in their lives, and they value that. And so it's about building relationship. All chaplaincy ministry is about relationship building and intervening in people's lives through relationship. That's what it's all about. It really and truly is. That's where you have to be kind of gifted at that. And not gifted, but you have to be comfortable with it, I would say.
Well, I'm struck both by your gift, but also your deep commitment, right? Even your being here today after a long day of work and then serving at your church, you have this profound commitment, which is, I think, a part of the credibility. But I want to pivot just for a minute and say, I know I've done a little research about LAX, and we have some designated sacred spaces at LAX. But in the short reading I did about airport chaplaincy, the local history and religious demographics seem to condition whether or not how chaplaincy appears in the airport. And I'm wondering if you have any insight about what the configuration of conditions are that gave rise to this huge chaplaincy program at Dallas Fort Worth, as opposed to, forgive me, kind of the anemic presence that exists at LAX.
Well, I think the anemic presence often exists because an airport or an airport authority or a leadership board of an airport realizes, well, we need to provide a space. And it's how robust they want to work that and provide through that is up to them. I think that I can tell you the history on DFW Airport. When this airport was built, it was built in 2 counties. It's so large, it's got its own zip code. And so when this was built, they had to go to the leadership of both Fort Worth and Dallas and bring mayors in from both sides. And they thought, something, we're going to have a power play problem in this. We need to bring someone in here to bring some spiritual wellness to this, because it's going to be an intense battle to make this happen. And so they brought a chaplain in, and Fred Griswold was a brand new captain, and he came into that role, and the airport CEO embraced it. And the same thing has happened, though, at Atlanta and other airports that are large airports out there that have staffs of chaplains there. And I think that, but the CEO, the leadership of the airport has to kind of want that. And this day and time, it's a lot easier to provide that, because today, through the DEI movement in the corporate world, there's a conduit that provides an opportunity if you want to press into that. That's how it's opening the doors in the corporate world too, I should point out.
Well, there's a question that comes up every week for the chaplains that speak. Do you want to take care of your light? I see your light went off.
I'm having a lighting thing that's dying out.
That's all right. You look.
You see me? I'm sorry. I'm out of light.
No. I can see you fine. You're just fine. But the question comes up for self-care. So every you're talking about receiving a lot of stress and anxiety and trauma, and so the question is, how do you take care of yourself? What spiritual practices do you use to metabolize the stuff you encounter?
That's an absolutely great question. It doesn't matter really if you're in parish ministry or if you're in chaplaincy ministry. But chaplaincy ministry, I do think, is more demanding. If you got a robust parish and it's really big, that's different. I mean, but you usually got a staff there that can kind of, sift out some of the pastoral care. You can get waylaid in an airport within 1 hour. You can have multiple things that come up to you. So you do have to practice spiritual disciplines. And I mean, I would say Celebrate the Disciplines is one of the best books you've ever read, you'll ever read on this. And it talks about the disciplines of prayer and meditation and Bible reading and the things that you have to do. You also need to have, and I'm a firm believer in this, and I know Janet's coming from the same, theological education that I did. We have spiritual directors. We have someone that we have as our confessor, so to speak, and also the one that we lean into, when it becomes overwhelming, and they kind of got a pulse on our spiritual well-being. They can, and this is the same Episcopal priest. He's been ordained for 60 years. He's 82 years old, but you know what? He is still effective, and he's still my spiritual director and has been for 30 years almost. I mean, and he's still there, but he knows me like his son, and he can tell right away where I'm at in my need right now, and how much rest I'm getting in, how much spiritual devotion time I'm putting in. He can usually tell when I'm off balance. But you have to have that go-to source. You have to have a team around you to keep you fortified for the fight. If you don't, you're either going to burn out or you're going to run out and throw your hands up. And so you have to have that. It's absolutely critical to have support.
I'm wondering if you could make some observations for us we have about 11 more minutes because I know you're tired and I want you to know that I'm watching the time. So you're going to get to bed. But I'm wondering if you could make some observations about the changing religious landscape that's happening right now and how you see that manifest itself in the airport and in your chaplaincy.
Well, I think that you can't compartmentalize that from your life. I mean, we've got a lot of things going on in our culture right now. Well, that travels with you. It comes to work with you, whether you're an employee and you're doing that under your own roof, and that comes to work with you. We just, as human beings, we can't compartmentalize the things and the challenges around us in our culture today. So in an airport, which is like a city unto itself, and to have an airport, which is like a city, there's 5,000 people that work at DFW. That's a lot of people. That's a lot bigger than a lot of cities. Well, to not have a chapel and a chaplain there would be like having a 65,000 person city with no church or no level of caregiving for your community. So in that need, all those challenges of outside of work come to work with you. And you've got to be able to be there to meet people where they are, dealing with those challenges on the outside. And these are all the cultural challenges that are going on in our world right now today that come to airports. They come to work with you. They're part of your lives. They're part of your children's lives and everything else. You've got to learn how to deal with that. And if you've got a support team where you're at, you've got a better means to do that. Because even if you go to your church, your synagogue, your mosque every week faithfully, if you start going when you're 18 and you go to your 65 and you go to church every Sunday, you'll spend about 5,000 hours in church. If you go to work those same years, you're going to spend 90 to 100,000 hours of your life at work. Where are you going to need intervention in your life more often than not? It's going to be where you work, where you spend most of your time. That's where the chaplain role comes in. And that's how that person can intercede in these cultural challenges that we have around us today to help you have clarity in that, to help you pray through that, to help you walk that journey, and just to be there to listen. Most of what we do is just listen. I mean, I can talk all day, but the fact of the matter is you have to be a good listener or you're not going to be able to engage people and help them on their journey. And that's a lot of what we do. We listen. I don't have all the answers. The Bible doesn't have all the answers. But the fact of the matter is, if you will listen to someone, they will feel cared for. They won't, something, they won't remember what I said or what I did anyway, but they'll remember that I listened and that I cared for them. And that will bless their day. And that's priceless to someone because that gets them over the hurdle, over the hump. And whether it's an employee or a traveler. And not everybody's going to the airport to go to Disney World,
Right.
People,
right.
People, I mean, they're going to war, they're going to bury people, they're going to all kinds of things. And there you are on the front line to be there for them. And I tell you something, here's the funny thing, you'll appreciate this, Jenna. During Lent, our 40-day journey in our Lenten, in my denomination, you'd be amazed how many confessions I'll hear during Lent, because I'm the priest they'll never see again. It's a lot easier.
Right. Yeah.
And spill it at my feet, not have to take it home to their parish priest and tell them all their dirty laundry. So you'll be amazed how people will reach out to you and be willing to do that. And you're there for them. And whether you're a chaplain or you're a priest or whatever it is, people just need that engagement. They desperately need that. And if anything, the pandemic even proved that more so than we already knew. It just brought it to the front and center. And it really elevated the role of chaplains. It has been an absolute thrust in corporate chaplaincy for what can be provided in that space.
Part of my question was aimed at the NPR released a story recently that the percentage of people in America that claim that religion is their number one priority is 18%, which is down from 20%. And we all know, right, if you graph this, it's in steep decline. So I'm curious if you have noticed even in your airport chaplaincy, a shift in how that cultural shift changes how the ways in which you need to show up for other people.
I don't think it has, because in the airport environment, it's so stressful. So the stress is always there. It's not like they're doing something they enjoy doing. A lot of them they're traveling for vacation or whatever. They're still stressed with it. So, that I think is what makes it a little bit different than other, venues and other places where ministry, where you see this decline. In places where there's stress, I don't think I see those kind of numbers in decline. It's always there. I mean, people are right on the edge all the time. And if you can come in and intercede in that moment, you can take them off that edge and oftentimes de-escalate a situation, or just like I said, just comfort them. Let them calm down. Just go to the chapel. Come with me. We'll go to the chapel. We'll talk. We'll calm down. Or they come in looking for that, and then then a need will pop out. And the needs are there all the time. But when that relationship is developed and they feel comfortable in you, that's when you have an opportunity to really help them with what really is bothering them. Well, I'm going to bury my aunt, or my mom. I got an ugly situation with my father who just died, and I know I'm walking into an unknown. There's friction in the family, and you know what? They're just looking for someone to be there to listen and to help them and pray for them, or not even pray for them, but just to be there with them and empathize with them.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think what you're naming is something that we see in all kinds of chaplaincy, hospital included. So when a stenographer is asking a question of somebody, they're going to produce a very rational answer, right? What are your religious commitments? But people under distress respond differently. I mean, the example I often give in class is when my mother was dying, I prior to that, I would have told you there are a series of things I don't ask God for because my theology doesn't permit it, right? Mm-hmm. But when my mother was dying, you can bet I was begging God to heal her, bring her back, all the things that I cognitively disavow. So I think you're speaking to something we all sort of understand that statistic doesn't reveal, which is we all become meaning makers. I don't want to say believers, but meaning makers in ways that our rational cognitive mind will disavow in other places when we're under distress.
So people will default. I mean, honestly, at the core of all who we are. I mean, it's body, mind, and soul, or body, mind, and spirit, however you want to describe this. Mm-hmm. But we're in the three-legged stool model. You're only stable if all three of those legs are somehow firmly seated or on solid ground. Right. And when the ground gets shaky, you're going to default to one of those three things. And a lot of people, even though they may be marginal in their faith or their belief, will go to that space when it really gets upside down. Right. And that's where you have an opportunity just to model our faith, and that's to be love our neighbor as we love ourselves, and just to love them through the moment and be there for them. And that's priceless to them. It really and truly is priceless. I can't tell you, I've seen $10,000 checks coming into a plate in a chapel. For whatever reason, I have no idea what I pray with the people about. But and it's not the monetary amount, it's just the fact that people value that. That just shows, that puts a monetary mark on it, but it's priceless to them at the moment. Just to listen to them, pray with them, and just engage them. And they just feel like they walk through life and nobody really cares, and you can. And it takes a lot out of you, but there's nothing more rewarding at the end of the day than to me to turn the light out tonight and say, you know what, well, I hope I blessed some chaplains' lives today, that encouraged them, because that's what I'm on this call to do. I'm here to encourage you and to inspire you to go out and find the greatest joy in ministry I've ever experienced is in chaplaincy ministry. I love parish ministry. It's great. It's nowhere near as fulfilling as what I do in an airport. I can walk out of a church on Sunday and I can prepare to preach all week and think I've got a perfect message. And I'll walk out and the same 200 people will say, oh, that's a great message, Pastor. You'll say, well, hey, what'd you like about it? Oh, the whole thing. And now right then I know that, they love me and they're telling me that. But when they come to a chapel mass and they hear just a 6 or 8 minute homily and we give them word and sacrament, they walk out of there and there's a sincerity in their voice in what they tell me, that they didn't know that they were going to be there that day, but God did, and they heard something they sincerely needed to hear. And there's a generosity and a gratitude in that. It's at a whole different level. It's the most rewarding ministry I've ever been a part of, ever. And it's irreplaceable. If this gets in your bloodstream and in your DNA of how you serve the Lord, nothing else will hit this spot. That's why military chaplains often will gravitate back toward chaplaincy ministry on the outside of the military, because that's what they did in war, in theaters of war, or in places where people are in peril. And there's nothing like that in the regular polarized world of the church that we often sequester ourselves in ministry. It's
Right.
just, not everybody's cut out for that. And they're really not. But if you're on this call, you probably are. And so I'm here to encourage you to continue to get all the education you can, continue to learn what you can, and just make yourself available. And God will bless you. I know I've been blessed by what I've had an opportunity just to talk to you today about.
Well, Father Greg, I'm going to tell you that it's clear to me that you have found your vocation. That's first thing. That's clear to me. The second part is that I can't speak for everybody, but I can see people's heads nodding. And I, as a person who can sometimes get discouraged about the work of chaplaincy, you have filled my tank. Like, this has been absolutely, like, I feel full of encouragement. So I'm grateful for you. And I also this is really inspiring. Like, there's several people private messaging me about chaplaincy at LAX and how can we develop that. And we may be back in conversation with you and in touch with you.
Anything I can help to do to build up or develop another chaplaincy somewhere in this country at an airport, that's where my livelihood's been all my life. It's the family that I've been a part of all my life is aviation. And so I'm here to serve, and any way I can help, I will. And seriously, just reach out. And any way I can help you at all, I'm here to serve and here to encourage you. And I thank you for the opportunity today to be here. And I pray that God will continue to inspire all of you.
Thank you, Father Greg, for being with us tonight. It was fantastic. Seriously, so fantastic. People are clapping. But before you go, and before everyone else goes, I want to make sure and remind everyone that tomorrow night is our monthly information session. If you're interested in talking about CPE for lay people, we'd be happy to have you at 6:30 tomorrow night on our information session. You can sign up for it on our website. Sharon, who's the director of Prism Chaplaincy for prison chaplaincy, she'll be there. So you can find out more information about that on our website. But Father Greg, thank you for coming tonight. You were fantastic.
Hey, if you come through DFW Airport, listen for the announcement or come by and see me. I'm at D40, and I'd love to see you or one of our chaplains. Look for us and tell them we're here to serve you. We'd love to.
All right. Thank you, Father Greg. You rest well so you can go to work tomorrow.
All right.
We're grateful for your time.
You're welcome.
Bye.
God bless.